Today we're in Chester, which is the gateway to Wales and to the northwest of England. And we're standing outside the East Gate, which, if you can read the inscription on the top, was built in 1769 by Lord Grosvenor. That name, Lord Grosvenor, will appear a lot in this narrative about Chester. The Grosvenor family, in a sense, are the godparent of Chester. Now, this gate is very significant because this was part of the original Roman wall, which was built in AD 70, almost 2,000 years ago. I mean, obviously it's an upgraded version of the gate, but people have gone through this gate for almost 2,000 years in and out of the city of Chester. We're standing in a place of great antiquity. Now, can you just imagine the Roman soldiers, the legionnaires, the 20th Roman Legion, marching into Chester here 2,000 years ago? What a sight that must have been. Why did the Romans build a settlement here on the bank of the River Dee? A town they called Diva Victoris. The reason is there were important lead deposits in North Wales, which the Romans mined. Lead was a key metal, a key part of their construction industry. So they mined the lead in North Wales, they brought it to Chester. And from this gate, it was then taken out to the capital of Roman Britain, York, and to Manchester and beyond. So through this gate, during the Roman Empire, lead convoys would come through, guarded by Roman soldiers. It was a precious metal at the time, it was very important. And so we're about to enter the great city of Chester, the ancient city of Chester. Now, on top of this gate, in 1897, to commemorate the 60th anniversary of the coronation of Queen Victoria, this clock was set up. On the left of the clock are the three lines of the English royalty, and on the right are the three wheat sheaves, which represent the Grosvenor family, the Duke of Westminster, whose wealth allowed Chester to flourish. This clock is the most filmed clock outside of Big Ben. It's a fabled clock. It's a beautiful clock, as you see. And when the hour strikes, unfortunately we've just missed it, the town crier appears and announces the time. So it's a beautiful location to start our little trip through Chester. Now, if you can just swivel the camera around to this Tudor building here at the entrance to Chester. The date is 1395 on this building. It's been restored during the Victorian period. But Chester is full of a lot of medieval Tudor buildings, and we're going to look at those today. We're going to have a walk around the walls and we're going to explore this fascinating city. So come with me and let's discover Chester. This is the famous Grosvenor Hotel, which was built at the start of the 20th century. It's a fantastic display of Tudor, mock Tudor or Tudor revival architecture. Chester, the black and white town. We're actually now on the walls of Chester. Chester is another one of the great English walled cities. It's got over 2 miles of walls around it. Big place. When the Romans set it up, it was bigger than Londinium, which was going to be their capital. It's actually bigger than York. It was going to be the major Roman town in the west. But the Romans never really went into Wales and never crossed the Irish Sea because they found the Celts in the mountains of Wales and in the bogs of Ireland a formidable foe, and it wasn't worth their while to subdue them. So this great centre of Roman power, where the 20th Legion was based, was never reached its full potential because it was supposed to dominate the west of the Roman Empire. The Romans believed that the world ended on the west coast of Ireland, the Western Sea. There was nothing beyond that. Of course, they didn't know America was beyond it. So this was going to be their western capital, but it never actually developed that way. But these walls have survived and been redeveloped through time. The Saxons came here. Ethelflaed, the daughter of King Alfred, rebuilt these walls in 907 and used them as a defence against the Vikings. And then in 1070, William the Conqueror arrived at Chester. It was the last town in England that he conquered. And he took control of this town and strengthened the walls further and built Chester Castle. And ever since, people have walked along these walls, famous people. You can see a character here, Wesley, the Wesley Church Centre. John Wesley actually went on a preaching tour around these walls in 1740. So you can get a sense of the history that we're standing on here. British history is very deep, it goes back a long way. And when we're trying to see the future of our country, and is our country worth fighting for, it's when we come to places like Chester and we see how deep our roots go, that we realise the obligation we have to maintain Britain and to give it a future, to keep this heritage going. It's so valuable and means so much. This is the Roman amphitheatre, which was built as part of the Roman culture of Chester. At its height, it seated 4,000 people. You can see how significant this city was to the Romans. You can imagine what happened there, the great plays through the ages that they performed. It was also a place of oratory, where the governors would address the citizens and the generals would address the soldiers before battle. So, what an amazing place. A Roman amphitheatre in the northwest of England. It causes your imagination to leap over time, to imagine the Roman citizens, the Romano-Britons they were called, the Britons who joined into the Pax Romana, assembled here at great civic events, and it survived to this present day.
Hello, citizens.
These are the ancient Roman gardens outside the walls of Chester. Amazing that you think that the Romans themselves came and had recreation here and would have little garden parties, little plays. You know, such a length of time. British history. Fantastic, isn't it? Now, if you look at the wall here, you'll see that there's an area which has been totally rebuilt. In the English Civil War in 1645, Chester was made into a royalist stronghold, and the Parliamentary Army came here and put their cannons close to this wall and just blasted a hole through the wall here to take it and to dispossess the royalists. And this was repaired after the Civil War. So this, you know, the history of Chester just unrolls over time. Incredible depth to it. And why are we interested in this? Why are we interested in our past? You know, because this is our identity. This is who we are. We're seeing how we've evolved. This whole society has evolved through centuries, you know. Centuries of struggle and building and effort to create modern Britain. And today, millions of people are coming to our country from all over the world, for whom this heritage means nothing. Who've come with their own heritage from their own lands, with alien religions and alien cultures, and they don't seem to want to give up those cultures. They don't want to assimilate into our history and our way of life. They simply want us to accommodate them, and they can then impose their way of life upon us, and this will all be totally irrelevant to them. In fact, they'll despise it. We've seen in Afghanistan when the Taliban, they just blew up 3,000-year-old Buddhists, they just blew them up. and this wall would mean nothing. If they wanted to expand the city of Chester, if this became another colony for the immigrants, they'd simply demolish this wall. They have no desire to conserve what is ours. So this is so precious that we maintain what is ours and keep possession of it. We don't want to be dispossessed in our own land. We don't want what is ours taken from us, because as we're seeing here, it was built through the effort of our ancestors, our forefathers, and we should value it. We do value it. Chester people love coming here. They love to experience this history because it belongs to us. It's ours. It's what made us. It's what gave us our soul. I mean, we're going to go to Chester Cathedral shortly and we'll see our spiritual heritage as well. It's so important that we defend what is ours in this land.
No,
Just going to ask you about Chester.
Oh, right.
Yeah, on a day out of Chester.
Well, on our way back from seeing the Terracotta Warriors in Liverpool.
Oh, lovely. What do you think of Chester? Do you like
We
it?
love it. Yeah. Our youngest
Is this your
son
first time, is it?
No, our youngest son lives quite close to here.
This is our heritage, isn't it? This is our history.
Oh, absolutely.
You know.
Yes.
Are you aware that here, you see in the wall, that was blasted, the hole was blasted in the wall by the parliamentary forces of Cromwell.
Oh, in the Civil War?
Yeah, in the Civil War, because the
it?
Royalists
Yeah,
were
yeah.
stationed here.
Yeah.
And then this is the Roman Gardens. You can see the pillars of the Roman.
Yeah.
What does it mean to you, that depth of history? 2,000 years of
Oh, you've
history.
got to preserve it.
Does it give you a lot of pride?
Oh,
Yeah,
to
yeah.
preserve
And
it.
preserve- yeah.
What do you think of the way Britain's changing now? There's a lot of immigrants coming in.
Oh.
It's changing the country. Think we're losing our
You know
identity.
what, we'd
No.
rather not say.
No, because will they appreciate this the way
No.
we do?
We're
No.
losing our heritage.
No.
We're losing our heritage.
That's
Yeah,
it,
thanks for that. Yeah,
Yeah.
we are. We need to defend it, don't we? Because it's so valuable. This is the people who gave us our present, aren't they?
You've got
This
to
is who we
preserve
are.
things like this.
Yeah,
you
I
really
agree
have.
entirely. Thanks
Yeah.
for that, folks.
You're welcome.
No problem.
You're welcome.
Yeah. Mm.
This is the Parliamentary Army breaching the wall of Chester in the famous battle 1645 for the city. You can imagine what a dramatic battle that would have been. Lives were lost, the muskets were firing. It was a battle for the soul of this nation, and we're in a battle now for the soul of the nation. It hasn't come to arms yet, but who knows what the future holds. We're standing overlooking the River Dee now. This was the reason that Diva, the Roman city, was laid down, because the Dee was one of the great rivers of Britain at the time, and the lead that had been mined in Wales was brought here and then shipped around Europe. Unfortunately, the River Dee started to silt up quite dramatically, and in the 13th century it ceased to be a viable port, Chester. And when King John came here in 1207 on his way to Ireland with his army, he was unable to move his army out of Chester. So he gave a charter to the nearby city of Liverpool, and he moved his forces to Ireland from Liverpool. And Liverpool superseded Chester as the great port in this part of England, in the west coast of England. And Chester, in many ways, was preserved because of that. Whereas Liverpool went through a whole process of redevelopment, Chester was caught in a bit of a time warp. Its medieval glory was preserved forever because it ceased to develop really as a city from that period. It became, in the 18th century, a bit of a tourist centre. What was so attractive about Chester was the sandstone of which these walls were built. It's Cooper sandstone. It's a very red sandstone. It's very attractive to the eye. And people love to promenade along these walls to see the sights. So just enjoy the river from this perspective. We're on the banks of the River Dee here, and this is where you can see the walls are the most magnificent. They're pretty high walls. I mean, I wouldn't like to scale them. And they're built of solid blocks of sandstone. Cooper red sandstone, magnificent stone this. Now you can see the history of Chester in the walls. I mean, the original base here, this is the original Roman wall. These are the stones that the Romans laid. Then came the Saxons, and they built another layer onto the walls. But it was the Normans after 1070 who really developed the walls to keep the Welsh at bay, Welsh raiders, who were regarded as sort of barbarians at the time. And so this was a defensive position for the Normans, you know, and they developed these walls. And they were only ever breached in the English Civil War when cannon came along. They're not thick enough to withstand a real assault by cannons. They were very effective at stopping raiders coming in the medieval period, but they ceased to have a function, certainly after the English Civil War. And they become almost derelict for a time. A lot of them were falling off. It was very dangerous, these walls. But the Victorians, as they did, they put their heart into renovating these walls and making them secure and making them last. And it's thanks to the Victorians that they're still standing now. The Victorians loved to promenade around city walls, and Chester was one of their favourite locations. So, yeah, thank God that they preserved them. Yeah, as well as walls, I also love bridges. What a magnificent bridge that is, the Grosvenor Bridge. It's the main bridge across the River Dee. It was actually the original Roman bridge, which has been rebuilt since. But it's a beautiful sight, isn't it? Again, it's built in that classic red Cooper sandstone of Chester. Back on the walls of Chester, promenading the walls is such an enjoyable day here. You've just looked at the tower, the Norman keep at the heart of Chester Castle. Of course, been repaired through the ages, but it was actually a prison for centuries, 200 years. If you look on the left here, this is the restoration of Chester Castle by the architect Thomas Harrison, quite a famous architect in this neck of the woods. We're going to look at the Chester University, which has been built around this area on the castle ground shortly. But it's another very pleasant vista over Chester. Let's carry on our little promenade. Looks beautiful here, doesn't it, on the autumn scene, Chester Castle. You see the walls, the castellated walls. See the height of the walls there. Beautiful red sandstone. This was the Normans' addition to Chester Castle. Powerful stronghold here. This is where the armies of Edward I gathered at the end of the 13th century, before the conquest of North Wales. North Wales was a bit of a wild territory at the time, the home of sort of renegade kings and princes. And the Normans had decided they had to subdue North Wales, and even though it was a difficult task, the Romans failed to do it. They gathered an army here at Chester Castle and marched into North Wales and built all those other castles, Conway and Carnarvon and Beaumaris and so on. So it's a bit of a historic scene here. It was also the base of Hugh Lupus, who was the first Earl of Chester, created by William the Conqueror. He was a very significant figure because he basically controlled the whole of the northwest of England from this castle here. There was a parliament here. He would gather the barons, the Norman barons, the great people of this area, to decide on strategies ahead. And it was also a base for the invasion and subjugation of Ireland as well. So this was really the entree point into the west of the British Isles, Chester Castle. Amazing that it's still standing in such good condition. Again, I think we've got a lot to thank the Victorians for. Across the road here is Chester Races, which is the oldest racecourse in Great Britain. It was created for the The sport of kings, Henry VIII, he gave a charter to the town to create a royal racecourse. And it's a wonderful racecourse. We'll go and take a look at that now. And we're off. A day at the races. Chester Racecourse. Magnificent sight. It's within the city boundaries. It's the oldest racecourse in Britain. It was given a charter by Henry VIII way back in the 1530s. And it's a fantastic day out here if you ever come to Chester Races. You have some great meetings here. And again, it's part of the rich fabric of British life. We love to see horses race. It's a magnificent stand as well. It's really well looked after, this racecourse. Next time we'll come when there's a meeting on. We're now entering the University of Chester, which was built by Thomas Harrison, famous local architect. It's built in Greek style, Greek Renaissance style. It's the Greek Revival. It's the most extensive collection of Greek Revival architecture in Britain, so it's a very significant place. See these magnificent Doric columns here, Greek columns. This is actually based on the Acropolis in Athens, this entrance. What a grand entrance to a university. You can see the full display of Greek Revival architecture in this university. We've got Ionic columns, we've got Doric columns, we've got the porticos. It's quite magnificent, this. And there at the centre of it all is a statue of Queen Victoria. Seen in many English cities, as we all know. Victoria is de rigueur for anything in the 19th century. Victoria de Gracia. Victoria by the grace of God. And in her hand is the orb, the world. And in her right hand is the sceptre, the ruler of the world. This is the glory of the British Empire. The lion and the unicorn as it's most rampant. Victorian Britain is a celebration of glory. The glory of the classical world, as we see here with the Greek Revival architecture. The glory of Christendom, with the orb in her hand and a sceptre, the rule of Christ. And the Victorians were unapologetic about their imperialist project. They saw themselves as a civilizing force and a force for law and order in the world. Pax Romana, which had originally created Chester, is now replaced by Pax Britannica, the peace of Britain, the law and order they created around the world, which is essential for trade and good government, the rule of law. And this statue symbolises that. That's the greatness of Britain. I mean, after the Second World War, we passed the baton of order to the United States. It became Pax Americana. But we should be proud of this. We should be proud of our history. Proud of our contribution that we made to the development of human civilization around the world. I mean, they tried to denigrate our imperialist past, but it was glorious. It gave people an opportunity to enter in to the prosperity of modernity, to enter in to the improvements that Britain brought about. Britain had a civilizing mission. It brought peace and it brought prosperity wherever it went. And thank God, indeed. Victoria de Gracia. Thank God for Queen Victoria. This is the Rose in Chester, the most famous shopping arcade in the world. It's a medieval shopping arcade. It's unique to Chester. We're going to go for a stroll along it now. The famous Three Old Arches, the oldest shopping front in Britain. It's been there since 1274 AD, the 13th century. We're looking there at the reign of Henry III, medieval England, survived that long. Incredible. These rows are unique. The Rees shopping arcade. The rumour was that they were built on rubble that was left over from the medieval buildings, but now they sit on top of shops. But it's a unique shopping experience here in Chester. This is the famous Bridge Street in Chester. It leads down to the bridge gate at the end and then the river beyond. For me, it's the most magnificent row of shop facades in Britain. We've just looked here at this Dutch building here, unique building from the 18th century. Beautiful Dutch architecture and all this sort of Tudor revival and actual Tudor buildings mixed in with a little bit of Georgian. It's a fantastic sort of potpourri of British architecture in the 15th, 16th, 17th centuries. A real shopping experience on both sides of Bridge Street. We're going to go to the cross now, the Market Cross, because this was the centre of the market in Chester. At the heart of every medieval city was the Market Cross, and this is the Market Cross of Chester, except it's not a cross. At the top of it is a lantern. This was to represent the light of the world rather than a cross of Christ. So it's quite a unique column, to be honest. But this is where the market would gather in the medieval times. At the top of Bridge Street, they bring the goods over the river, come up Bridge Street, and they'd set up market here. We've got the West Gate to the west, the East Gate, and the South Gate, which is Bridge Gate. So this was the heart of ancient Chester. The important thing about this cross is that it's within the shadow of St. Peter's Church, the ancient Chester Church. Because what went on in the market had to be sanctioned not only by the church, but the crown as well. Chester was given a charter by William the Conqueror to trade in goods. So this, in a sense, was the source of Chester's wealth, the Market Cross. St. Peter's Church, the Guild Church. Every craft and trade was organised in a guild, and it would be sanctioned by this church, and it would have an annual service here to sanctify the guild. Now, it was really important to be part of a guild. If you weren't part of a guild, you couldn't practice your trade, and you couldn't trade in the market. So this church had enormous power in the medieval England, medieval Chester. Absolutely stunning Tudor revival shop fronts, buildings. If you look at the top here, you see the chimneys, the chimney stacks. That's the signature of John Douglas, the Liverpool architect, who specialised in this Tudor architecture, Tudor revival. You can see the figures as well. We've got the figure of Henry Lupus here, who was the first Earl of Chester. Very significant man, given enormous power following the Norman conquest. And we got various figures of justice there and some saint. Yeah, beautiful. I mean, really spectacular Tudor architecture in Chester. This, for me, is the pièce de résistance, the most fantastic piece of Tudor architecture in Chester. You have the figure of the king there. It's actually Edward VII. Who's a 20th century figure, believe it or not. Queen Victoria's son. So this is all post-Victorian, but pre-First World War, which is very significant because after the First World War, all this style of architecture went out of fashion and modernism came in, and the rest, as they say, is history. We lost this sense of the past and this emphasis on detail. You saw at the bottom the minstrels, the Chester players. These were people who were sent to face a Welsh army in the 15th century when Chester was being attacked by a Welsh prince. The Earl of Chester had no standing army to defend Chester, so he decided to send out a band to give the impression he had an army on the march. And the Welsh army heard the Chester minstrels approaching, turned and fled. It was a bluff that worked. But what a fantastic building. Chester Town Hall. The architect was a man from Belfast, an Irishman, William Henry Lynn. It's built in sort of Venetian Gothic style, so it's quite in contrast to the rest of the architecture here. But it's a manifestation of the civic pride of Chester in the 19th century and the ambition of Chester. Every English city in the 19th century had to have a grand town hall. It was a statement of intent, a statement of power, and Chester, no exception here. Magnificent building. But behind us now is Chester Cathedral, formerly Chester Abbey. And we're going to take a look at that now. What we do in our little visits to the towns and cities of England is we take in the castle. We hope it's got a wall. We'll take in the town walls, we'll take in the river, and of course, to make it complete, we take in the cathedral. And this is Chester Cathedral. It's a magnificent medieval, well, pre-medieval building. It was actually a Norman cathedral, Norman Abbey, which was upgraded to a cathedral after the Reformation, the seat of the Bishop of Chester. This is the east door here where the processions would come out, the famous Chester Mystery Play. It's a magnificent church to go inside. The Norman arches are there. But again, it's built in that beautiful Chester sandstone. Cooper red. Unmistakable. Gives Chester its particular flavour, you know. And we're going to take a little tour of this cathedral now. There's plenty to see here, including an enclosed courtyard. This is an absolutely beautiful, it's a covered cloister at the heart of Chester Cathedral. You've seen a tower, it's all built in this magnificent red sandstone. We just attended evensong, evening prayer in the cathedral. I wish I could film inside, it's absolutely stunning, Chester Cathedral inside. The outside, it's a little bit moth-eaten, as they say. A lot of it was restored in the Victorian times by George Gilbert Scott. But it's a lovely, peaceful courtyard here, just relaxing, yeah. This is where the monks of the abbey would have rested in the evening. We're in the early evening now. And it's a beautiful place. I hope you've enjoyed our little trip around Chester today. Another magnificent English town. If you like these little historic tours and the political talks that we give, please hit the subscribe button. The more the merrier. And if you would like to make a financial contribution towards the cost of these videos, you will see a link in the description below. Just thank you for watching, and there'll be more coming soon. Cheers.